Hey everybody, welcome to Clickheads. I'm Eddie the Chump, and today we're going to be talking about Valorant. Now, there's been some new info circulating in the last few days concerning the game modes available at launch and in the future, and these make for some quite interesting reading. As a fan of tactical FPS like Counter-Strike, there's a huge part of me that asks the question, why does a game like Valorant need another game mode in the first place? Well, there are legitimate reasons to have them, for sure, especially when the concept of practice enters your mind. But for right now, let's cover what game designer Trevor Rumleski had to say in an interview with IGN Nordic and an AMA from Discord. We're completely open to exploring new modes post-launch, Valorant's game designer said of potentially adding more playlists, but admitted anything they do beyond the diffuse mode would have to wait until after launch. He continues, "For now, we have this experience we really want to craft and make sure that it's as good as it can be. There are a lot of games out there and we acknowledge that. We want to provide players with a fresh take on the genre." In the Discord AMA, Trevor replied to a question about game modes thusly, "Exploration of modes is definitely a consideration," and Deserto commented on that by saying that Riot's plans right now were to focus on the core mode at the moment. Now, Deserto mentioned in their article about these comments that there are a few possibilities that they thought might be included. They mentioned Deathmatch, which I personally think is an absolute shoo-in, almost 100% guaranteed, and a mode like Hostage Extraction, which I think is less likely. Counter-Strike also has a very similar mode, although nobody really plays it outside of Battle Pass missions. So I want to return to where I mentioned practice earlier in the video. Mentally, I don't count Deathmatch as a separate game mode for a game like Counter-Strike. And that's because everybody that plays CS and is motivated to try and improve at the core game uses Deathmatch to practice mechanics, and that's about it. In fact, the game has its own Deathmatch servers, but a lot of players, just like me, join custom DM servers at higher tick rates to practice in a very hardcore environment. DMing for an hour or two a day is seen as a basic fundamental part of self-improvement. It's by no means the only thing a player works on, as the skill required to be good at these games are much wider than simple aim, but dedicated hardcore players certainly do use these tools. As such, some kind of DM solution will probably be included into Valorant at very close to launch. We've already seen a glimpse of a proper training stage within the game from the teaser video, so I expect Riot to already know for sure these kinds of practice tools are a basic requirement. As for other core modes that don't just function as practice tools, I'm not sure that they'll be arriving anytime soon. Trevor doesn't count them out, and that's wise. Don't want to close any doors and then have to go back on your word later, like the Overwatch team did with Deathmatch, having said it will likely never be done, and then hey presto, it's in the game. But as I alluded to earlier, the diffuse game mode is clearly the bedrock of Valorant's design. I could wax lyrical for hours about why the game mode is so good for an esports FPS, but I won't waste your time. I'll try and keep this brief. Diffuse is so strong because it has within it natural pacing, which other modes can't really compete with, especially from a spectator's point of view. There can be moments of inaction as the attackers set up, followed by frantic fragging as they try and take a site and the defenders respond, followed by other periods of relative calm post-plant, and then the always tense clutching moments as the defender tries to locate surviving attackers and defuse said bomb. Every round is like a mini action movie, which is great to play but even better to watch. And in a game like Counter-Strike, nobody seriously plays any other mode. Ostensibly, diffuse is the game. I expect Valorant to be no different. Now, up until this point in the video, I've been very hardcore player-centric, as that's the perspective I'm approaching the game from. But as detailed by Riot devs at various points, and in this Polygon article, Valorant will be free to play with a Battle Pass and cosmetic system to fund it all. These elements are designed to attract and keep casual players' interest, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that, and if there's game modes to complement that, then that's great. My favourite Respawn game mode of all time is Hardpoint, and if Riot say, hey, here's a fun thing to do, I'm not going to be mad. How the abilities work in a mode like that is up for debate though. Maybe everything goes onto cooldowns and not points, kind of like a game of Overwatch. As a fun aside, I can see myself playing that. But I don't think that there will be a serious contender for main competitive mode anytime soon. Personally, I think having so many core modes is part of the problem when it comes to a game like Overwatch. I've been convinced for a long time that Payload is that game's best mode overall, and whenever I get 2 CP I want to call Jeff and plead for mercy. I would much rather, as Trevor has hinted at, that Riot spend their dev time making the main focus of the game the best it can be, rather than squandering resources on entertaining distractions. That's just me though, I'm sure many of you might feel differently. The main takeaway from Trevor's comments is that maybe other modes do arrive, but outside of faux practice modes like Deathmatch, they might be quite far away. Don't expect get them close to release. Now, there are a few things that I want to talk about as well at the end of this video, and these are all snippets of information that many potential Valorant players might have missed in the torrent of info that was released last week. The articles that these notes are taken from will be in the description, and I highly suggest you give them a read if you haven't already done so. First up, let's talk about maps. Now, in some of the gameplay footage, people could spot that there were 3 bomb sites instead of the usual 2. Many thought this might be Riot's twist on the defuse formula, but it turns out that this is unique to that map alone, and that in fact all maps have some unique mechanic that separates them out from the pack. Polygon details it thusly. Each of the 2 Valorant maps we've played so far has had unique twists. For instance, one of them has 3 bomb sites, while another has no middle area and instead has 2 one-way teleporters that make a loud noise every time someone passes through them. Sal Volcano Gorozo is one of the devs responsible for map design, and he had this to add in the IGN Nordic article. We start with a unique design and discuss a lot with the team. There is a lot of playtesting going on. We playtest every single day. If a map is not bringing something new, something exciting or balanced, then we move on from that. This approach will likely lead to a map pool as varied as the agents are themselves, and if I had to guess, meta team compositions for those unique playstyles. It's at this point that I want to cross every limb and appendage available to me that Valorant allows players to choose which maps they want to play. Counter-Strike allows you to search for all the maps or just one map of your choice and everything in between. This is honestly a godsend, and I'll explain why. These tactical FPSs are very complex and deep games, and the maps are a huge part of that complexity. In Counter-Strike, pro teams are often measured in their greatness by how many of the maps are in their pool, as in how many of the maps they can play at an elite level, because no team, even one made up of pros, can play them all. There's just too much knowledge and experience required for mastery. A big barrier to improvement in players is not being able to manage all of this at one time, and essentially not getting good at one thing before they move on to the next. A massive pet peeve of mine with Overwatch was that not only is each individual hero difficult to master, but that the context that that hero should be played in, on what maps and in what situations, represents a huge skill set to learn. Likewise, the game modes complicate this further, and what happened with Overwatch was that because players can't specify which mode or map they want to play, they ended up learning singular heroes irrespective of anything else, and in a game where one-tricking is not supposed to be the norm, it ended up happening anyway because that's all the player could control in their play experience. This held up improvement and community-wide knowledge about how to play the game to such an extent that the pro scene and ranked differ almost to the point of being 2 separate games. That is not good if you want your regular players to buy into a pro league. In CS, matchmaking is obviously different to pro matches, but even at relatively low levels, players grasp fairly complex ideas like knowing set utility plays on certain bomb sites on certain maps. That's because they're empowered to concentrate on one thing at a time if they so wish. Valorant has to mirror this, in my opinion, or risk the same fate as Overwatch, where everyone plays in the same style on every map, even though that's not how you're actually supposed to play. I'm all up for totally unique maps, just let me learn them on my own terms. Riot, please. Agent Hitboxes. So on the Discord AMA, lead designer Classic answered a question about all the agents having the same health and hitbox size, which is notably different from other hero-based shooting games. They had this to say: "This deserves a long answer, I'll write something up for later. Simple answer is we focused on tight, lethal, tactical gameplay. Changing HP or hitbox has significant impact on gameplay, and we want agents to be chosen for their toolkits, not passive stats like this." Now, I like this answer myself. I took it to mean that when playing a very tightly balanced shooter, passive advantages and stats can skew the gameplay quite heavily. Some games do want that. Overwatch tanks need to be designed differently to supports and DPS, and the game is better for it. But as most of the abilities in Valorant mirror some sort of utility from games like CS, the player expectations about taking duels should too. You need to know as a player that when you peek another agent, nothing matters more than hitting your shots, as at its core, Valorant will be FPS first and abilities complementary to that. That could get a bit wacky if when you went to peek a player holding mid, they're Winston sized and have more health than you, and yet have the same weapons available to them. I'm also glad the female agents have the same hitbox size as their male counterparts, as in previous games that has caused a bit of an issue. Gears of War, I'm looking at you here. abilities carrying over on death. Now this might seem like a small detail, and it is if you don't fully grasp the context, but in Polygon's article covering their playtime of Valorant, they said abilities need to be purchased before rounds as single-use items, but they'll carry over if you die before getting a chance to use one. Anyone that plays games like CS will know that is decidedly not the case in those games. If you buy smokes, flashes, and other nades, when you die without using them, not only do you not get to keep them, but your opponents can pick them up off the ground and save themselves money for the next round. Valorant not doing that is interesting. Making players waste money is a form of punishment in Counter-Strike. It means you can prevent your opponents from having good buy rounds more often, increasing your chances of easy round wins due to mismatches. This principle will be in Valorant with weaponry, which is great, but the abilities carrying over on death gives me slight pause. It might turn out to be better, but it's something I reserve judgment on and something I think is important for players to grasp ahead of time. Weapon recoil patterns and spread. So in my video from last week, I went into detail about how I think the weapons in Valorant will have fixed, predictable recoil patterns. I also made the argument for why that is a good idea, because it enables player mastery of said mechanics and a way to increase the skill gap. Riot, however, have been a bit cagey about confirming this absolutely, as these two answers from the Discord AMA indicate. When asked, do weapons have recoil, Classic replied, the weapons have recoil, bloom, spread, and error, and most can use ADS as well. He was also asked, any news on spray patterns versus recoil? To which they replied, I was thinking about doing a more in-depth write-up for this one, I'll work on that. Not the most conclusive set of answers, which might explain why we've had conflicting reports from playtesters. Perhaps weapon recoil is predictable up until a point, and then later in the spray, bloom, spread, and error takes over and makes it much less controllable. This would encourage a short burst, controlled firing playstyle, which, being honest, is what you want to do anyway, even in games where the recoil is 100% fixed. It does, however, introduce some RNG, which I will always argue against in anything that's meant to be competitive. Imagine playing a fighting game and sometimes moves just don't hit randomly. That would be terrible. I'll reserve judgment again on this, but I won't hide how I feel. I hope there isn't RNG. That would make Eddie very sad. And that's about all I want to talk about today. Let me know how you think about all of this and how I've broken it down in the comment section down below. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you like the content on this channel, please hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you get notified when we upload. Until next time.